Thank you very much. Let me just hand over straight away to our speakers. We have excellent speakers here on this panel. Please introduce yourselves and give me an indication of why you think this is so important today.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I really, I'm very, very pleased to be here. My name is Christelle Pratt. I'm the Assistant Secretary General for Environment and Climate Action of the OACPS, and I would be moderating the session for the next 45 minutes. And of course, looking forward to introducing the three main speakers for this session. Because I think, as you introduced earlier, our blue planet is dominated by the ocean. It covers, as you say, about 72% of it, and it constitutes more than 95% of the biosphere. So for many billions of people around the world, our oceans, seas and coastal areas are vital for their livelihoods, their food security and their well-being. So that's the reason why I'm here.
Thank you very much, Christelle, for that warm welcome. Do tell us about your speakers. I know that you're going to address two major questions in your discussion today. So outline for those what those are and how we need to follow them.
Well, I think as you mentioned earlier, I mean, this session is very, very much about harnessing the blue economy for sustainable economic development of African, Caribbean and Pacific states. And of course, the OACPS is made up of 79 member states, and 64 of those are coastal states. And so, of course, the ocean is a very important part of their lives and their economies. 38 of our 79 member states are small island developing states. And so 16 small island developing states in the Caribbean, and then 15, that make up the Blue Pacific continent. And they're referred to often as the big ocean stewardship states. So, I guess one of the things is it's really not surprising that we can draw a very quick conclusion that our coastal states have great potential to sustainably manage, use and conserve their marine resources, and also take advantage of their vast maritime spaces and their under their jurisdictions. So I really very much wanted to hear from three main speakers in this session. We have Salome Taufa, who is the resource economist based in Fiji with the Pacific Islands Forum. We very much look forward to getting Salome's perspectives on really how the Blue Pacific is organising itself towards a sustainable ocean economy. And then we have two more speakers from Africa and the Caribbean region. I'm not certain if you want me to introduce them now and then we can yield the floor to them. How do you want to do this? I'm sorry, I didn't realise that you were going to facilitate me, but there you go.
Christelle, thank you so much. I'm absolutely happy to leave it in your very capable hands from here on in. Do introduce your speakers and those two questions that we need to address.
Super. So if I may just say hello to Salome, a very familiar face and a former colleague. You have the floor, Salome, please.
Thank you very much, Christelle, and thank you for having me. Fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to join you today in this panel discussion. Many of the regional policy instruments in our region that has been developed in the past had been focused on our largest shared asset, and that is our Pacific Ocean. In March this year, the forum leaders issued their Ocean Statement 2021, which reaffirmed their commitment to sustainably manage, use, and conserve as one Blue Pacific, and guided by our regional commitments and policy instruments. And these policy instruments include the 2002 Pacific Islands Regional Ocean Policy, the 2010 Framework for Pacific Oceanscape, and the 2016 Pohnpei Ocean Statement. And in 2014, our leaders endorsed the Framework for Pacific Regionalism And our ocean economy was defined as the Blue Pacific, a narrative of a single united ocean-based blue continent, which recognizes the inseparable links between the ocean, the seas, and the blue and the Pacific Island peoples. In 2016, the forum leaders had called for an end to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And in 2018, they had further called on distant water fishing nations to eliminate subsidies to overcapacity and overfishing. And in this regard, it is of great importance that a WTO agreement on fishery subsidies considers the interest of developing countries, including the small island developing states, and are also in line with the SDG 14.6 mandate on special and differential treatment. My short contribution today will focus on two policy instruments that are under development with great emphasis on our ocean and how the sustainable use of our ocean resources is being considered through the blue economy lenses. Into 2019, the forum leaders noted that securing the future of the Blue Pacific requires a long-term vision and carefully considered strategy for regionalism and a collective commitment to achieve it. Reflecting on this, forum leaders endorsed the development of the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. This strategy is still under development. It has been undergoing comprehensive consultations with our members and key stakeholders. But ocean is indeed a key underpinning and cross-cutting strategic area of focus. In doing so, the 2050 strategy will consider science, innovation and research, access to sustainable marine transport, renewable energy, biodiversity and ecosystems, multi-stakeholder partnerships, and access to sustainable financing. The strategy is expected to be submitted to forum leaders for their consideration at the next face-to-face meeting. The second policy instrument is the Blue Pacific Economic Strategy. The 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent will be a high-level, long-term policy instrument that will guide the works in our region in the next 30 years. But to complement that, this proposed Blue Pacific Economic Strategy will definitely complement the 2050 strategy. And the concept note for this will be proposed to forum economic ministers at their meeting next month for their endorsement.
I think we appear to have a small technical hitch there. Perhaps, Christelle, you could pick up where we were left off, and hopefully we'll be able to get our speakers back in just a few moments.
Yes, and I think that there are just a few problems with connectivity. Yeah. So I do hope that Salome joins us back again, because of course the Pacific seems to be really quite focused in terms of developing sound policies that will enable them to progress and achieve, sustainable blue economies for their member states and for the region. I understand that we have three main speakers for this session, but we only have two with us online, I've been told. So I wonder whether we may just need to move, just in terms of saving time and knowing that we only have 45 minutes, to move to the second speaker, who is Jean-Paul Adam, the Director of the United Nations Commission for Africa's UNECA, so the Director for Technology, Climate Change and Natural Resource Management, the division of UNECA, based in Ethiopia. So Jean-Paul, if you could perhaps just provide us with your perspectives, please, in terms of Africa and its efforts towards a sustainable blue economy. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Christelle, and greetings in Brussels from Addis Ababa, and also from my home country of Seychelles, where I'm currently telecommuting. And it's a great pleasure to be speaking on behalf of Dr. Vera Songwe, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, on this most important of subjects. Because in this year of 2021, which has to be a super year for the climate and for sustainable development, the blue economy is one of the ways in which we can truly achieve building forward better, where we can invest in sustainable development, particularly around enhancing the natural environment and using those investments to build livelihoods which are sustainable and which also create more value addition for our economies. Africa, unfortunately, Africa's relationship with the ocean has often been defined by partnerships with distant fishing nations, with external investors, with sometimes minimal value addition created within African economies. The idea is to look at the blue economy in a different way and truly make the ocean a development space. It's also a space that will be critical for climate resilience, recognizing that the ocean is one of the most important climate regulators that exists. So recognizing all of these elements, the African Union have adopted in 2020 the African Union Blue Economy Strategy. And the Blue Economy Strategy is built on 5 main pillars. And this includes fisheries, aquaculture, conservation, and sustainable aquatic ecosystems. Secondly, shipping, transportation, trade, ports, maritime security, safety, and enforcement. Thirdly, coastal and maritime tourism, dealing with climate change resilience, building livelihoods that respond to climate resilience, reinforcing and rehabilitating the environment, and infrastructure which is environmentally sustainable. Fourthly, sustainable energy and mineral resources and innovative industries. And the 5th pillar is around institutional governance and ensuring that we can truly make the blue economy the sustainable vehicle that we want it to be. Firstly, in terms of fisheries, the fisheries are particularly important for Africa as part of its protein needs. And we'll note that Africa has currently the 2nd largest growth in fish consumption, with a projected increase of 27% between 2018 and 2030. However, this is nonetheless based on a situation where the actual consumption per capita will actually reduce, and this is because of the pressures on fish stocks. And therefore, the importance of properly addressing fisheries through management of the resource, which empowers local communities and allows real inclusion and participation through the value chain. In terms of coastal and marine tourism, this is something which has been evolving positively pre-COVID-19 into one of the most important economic sectors for Africa. Ecotourism is very well established in Africa, but particularly around the land-based resources. And there are nonetheless opportunities to further build on this going forward using the maritime spaces. The development of energy resources through the blue economy remains on the outer edges of the opportunities, but nonetheless, there are opportunities that are being explored, notably in Ghana, which includes the opportunities for offshore wind energy, floating photovoltaic panels, and also harnessing wave energy. And all of these are projected to be able to provide up to 7% of Africa's energy needs by 2030. This is also in the context where a lot of the emerging opportunities for oil and gas are situated in the ocean, as well as mineral resources. But this has to be dealt with in a very sensitive manner, recognizing the risk of stranded assets going forward. And the focus is very much around the renewable aspects of energy, rather than addressing the petroleum and oil reserves. But it is recognized that African countries need capacity building to be able to make sure that they're not left behind as countries around the world seek to explore the mineral resources that are found on the seabed. In terms of some of the challenges going forward, a lot of them are focused around the ability to finance investment in the blue economy. And this is where innovations can play a key role to help bring sustainable finance for African countries. One aspect that has been developed in the past, and this was something that I led when I was part of the government of Seychelles, was the finalization of a debt swap, whereby Seychelles repurchased a part of its sovereign debt using support of external partners, and in this case, it was the Nature Conservancy. And after refinancing this debt, the savings that were achieved were reinvested in terms of climate conservation. Currently within the ECA, we're supporting 4 countries in West Africa to explore the opportunity to do debt swaps in a similar way, but recognizing also their unique needs. And these 4 countries are Cabo Verde, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, and Mauritania. And we're looking at an array of projects whereby these funds could be invested. We should also recognize the opportunity to raise additional finance for investment in the blue economy through, for example, bond funding, such as through blue bonds. And this is, again, something that Seychelles explored in 2018. And we should note that Africa as a whole has a share of less than 1% of the global sustainable bond market. So there is an opportunity to leverage the vast expanse of Africa's oceans to be able to tap into these financing opportunities for climate resilience. We should also note that carbon trading and offsets are an opportunity that can be explored, looking at the ocean around Africa, and in particular with the goal of protecting at least 30% of Africa's oceans. The protection of oceanic areas is particularly important for the development of fisheries. A recent study by the American Network of Marine Protected Areas showed that for every 5% of additional marine protected area, you gain 20% increase in the value of catches within 5 years. So it's critical for the protection of the resources that we're able to expand these marine protected areas, but these can also be an opportunity to leverage additional finance by, for example, raising resources through carbon offsets, through debt swaps, or through bond financing. So the blue economy for Africa is a relatively new frontier, but one which represents huge opportunities for sustainable development, and particularly for us to address the concerns of accelerating growth in the era of the post-COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. In actual fact, I think you've covered a range of areas and, really outlined the very considered way in which Africa is approaching developing its sustainable blue economy. And I'm sure there will be quite a lot to learn between our various regions, and particularly given the early part of the intervention by Salome Taufa. Salome, you did go offline for a while and you were not given the opportunity to complete your intervention. Would you be able to come back in again and just finish off? And I hope that those listening will remember the few quite strategic instruments that the Pacific is working on. Please go ahead.
Thank you again, Christelle, and apologies for the poor internet connectivity. So as I mentioned earlier, we are now focusing as a policy political organization. We are focusing on our policies, and the blue economy is indeed a new area for us, but we are making sure that we capture them in our policies that we are developing going forward. And 2 of those policies I mentioned, the first one is the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, in which we are looking to, it's still under development, it's undergoing comprehensive consultation, and we're hoping to submit that to our leaders for their consideration at their next face-to-face meeting. And to complement the 2050 strategy, we are proposing to develop a Blue Pacific economic strategy. And this will be more of a short-term tool to achieve the goals of the 2050 strategy. And this strategy is aiming to assist our members stabilize their economies against the impacts of COVID-19, build their resilience to future shocks, and also support their long-term recovery efforts. And a key feature of this strategy will be the sustainable ocean economy, in which the blue economy will be a key driver of ocean-based economic activities. Key areas for consideration will be, of course, fisheries, which is a long-standing priority. It's a priority area for regional collaboration amongst the forum members. We're looking to also diversify our revenue streams by exploring opportunities, including nature-based solutions, and also more innovative financing mechanism. The strategy will also explore opportunities in aquaculture. This is an area that is largely underdeveloped in the Pacific. We will also look to explore areas like maritime transport, renewable energy, and ocean finance. The strategy will articulate and capture existing policy instruments that we have to harness the blue economy, including the Aid for Trade strategy, 2020 to 2025, which has a critical role in turning trade policies and strategies into real world trade development. And it will also incorporate a Pacific Islands private sector strategy. This is another strategy that is also under development, which aims to assist the private sector to boost trade and business competitiveness, as well as facilitate collaboration to promote business growth. And just to conclude, I just want to join our Pacific Ocean Commissioner in our call for greater collaboration with development partners to improve economic recovery efforts and the formation of a sustainable ocean economy in response to the COVID-19 pandemic challenges. Thank you again for the opportunity, Christelle. Back to you.
Well, thank you to both our speakers, Salome Taufa and Jean-Paul Adam. Now, we were to have been joined by a colleague of ours from the Caribbean, and I'm not certain whether they have been able to join. Could I just check, please, with the technicians? Okay. Well, it's really, really unfortunate because Jacqueline Emmanuel Flood of the Organisation of East Caribbean States and Director for Economic Affairs and Regional Integration was to have joined us. And I'm sure she would have been able to outline as eloquently the work that our regions of the OACPS are doing with respect to developing blue economy strategies. We've heard, from Salome the work underway in terms of the 2050 strategy for a blue Pacific continent, a 30-year strategy, and then of course complemented by the Blue Pacific Economic Strategy. And then from Jean-Paul, the 2020 African Union Blue Economy Strategy, and sitting underneath of all of that, all of this potential for our member countries, and particularly our coastal states, to really harness benefits from a sustainable ocean economy. But I know that there are a number of colleagues, oceanic colleagues or ocean colleagues, development colleagues listening in on this session. And so I have been given to understand that there are some that would like to take the floor just to make a few very short interventions. And so if I could just look to Felipe Januario, apologise if I mispronounced your surname, but please forgive me. And if you could just identify your organisation and then make a very brief presentation. There are several colleagues that have requested the floor in this session. Please, Felipe, you have the floor. I might need some help with the technicians.
I'm not hearing anything.
You're not hearing anything, so...
Sorry, Christelle. Yes. Just coming to you from the studio, I think we do have a small technical hitch, so perhaps we could get Salome and Jean-Paul to elaborate further while we try and sort out those connections. Always a gremlin issue when we're doing these big events, because of course here at EDD there are so many people connecting. We have hundreds of speakers, and of course coming to you from Brussels, we do have Joe Biden, the US president, visiting today, causing a few technical hitches. I have to be honest with you, it's a little bit tricky to get connectivity. So I will leave it to you,
I think
Christelle.
you're doing very well. I think you're doing very well at that.
Thank you.
You know, I think that one of the things that I wouldn't mind sort of exploring a little bit more deeply with both of our speakers is the matter of financing instruments and looking at sort of innovative financing mechanisms. Jean-Paul, you did touch on this issue of debt swaps and the work of the Seychelles being sort of a kind of providing some early experiences for now possibly 4 more countries in Africa. You know, if you could maybe just speak to that a little bit more, but also whether there are other particular instruments that Africa is considering, and then I'll move to Salome to look at the same sort of question, but to see whether a similar kind of thing could be adopted in the Pacific. But please, Jean-Paul.
Thank you very much, Christelle. And I think it's very interesting to look at the common areas. When I've been hearing Salome, I think there's so much in common in what's happening in Africa with the Pacific, with of course a local flavor which is specific to those regions. But in the context of the debt swap, that first I'll perhaps touch on what Seychelles did specifically, and then look at the possibilities for replication. So debt swaps were quite common in the 1980s, usually involving forested areas. I think there were a number done in the Amazon, for example. But around marine areas, it is a new concept. And what the Seychelles government did was to recognize that while the government had taken a lot of leadership in protecting almost 50% of the land area, the majority of the Seychelles territory was actually in the ocean. And in the Seychelles context, only 454 square kilometers of land, but 1.3 million square kilometers of ocean. And the goal, therefore, was to protect at least 30% of the exclusive economic zone of Seychelles. And this is now potentially a goal that will be adopted at the Convention on Biological Diversity. But the goal as well of putting that area under protection was linked to the specific benefits that this could bring in relation to the sustainability of the fisheries and also the protection that this provides for the development of ecotourism. The process started with a marine spatial plan, which is something which is particularly important for Africa, because a lot of the time there is little governance being applied on the high seas, mostly due to lack of capacity. And an appropriate plan put in place is one of the first steps that needs to be taken so that you ensure you have marine domain awareness and that you're able to intervene where there are areas of illegality and also protect particularly the interests of local economic stakeholders. And this is key for empowerment of local communities, and this is subsequently also critical for the protection of the resource. If everyone who's involved locally in protecting the resource feels that they have a stake, then they are going to make sure that they do their utmost to protect that resource. And the debt swap itself was recognizing the Seychelles had quite a lot of debt, and then working with partners to mobilize financing at a cheaper rate, because the problem for developing countries, but particularly African countries, is that there is a risk premium associated with raising finance in Africa. Getting that money from the Nature Conservancy meant that it was at a much more affordable rate. The average interest on the debt was in excess of 7%, and the rate that we achieved with the Nature Conservancy was below 3%. So it meant a dramatic reduction in the interest rate. Using those funds to buy back the debt, and then reinvesting those funds in what's called the Seychelles Climate Conservation and Adaptation Trust. And that trust fund, essentially, the Seychelles government continues to pay its debt to the trust fund rather than to external donors, external creditors. And the advantage is, of course, that you're paying in local currency, so you're less subject to the issues of foreign currency fluctuations. And also the savings in the interest rate meant that there's an additional amount of money that's available, but the government continued to pay at the same rate. And that additional money is plowed into marine conservation. And it's created a flow of funds of about $400,000 per year, which goes into marine conservation projects and the implementation of the Marine Spatial Plan. So in Africa, there are many ways that this can be replicated. The 4 countries that we're working with will not necessarily do exactly the same kind of project. It's not necessarily that you have to do a marine protected area. It can be related to another form of climate resilience. Some of these countries, for example, are looking at rehabilitation of mangroves because they play a critical role in preventing erosion, but also in the regeneration of fish stocks. So these are some of the projects that are being looked at. And the opportunity is if a country does have a high amount of debt and that debt is expensive, and then using flows that could be sourced from philanthropy, such as the Nature Conservancy, but we're increasingly also getting support from multilateral development institutions. And this is currently on the agenda as well of the World Bank. And there's a hope that at some point we could possibly do debt swaps with support from the Green Climate Fund or from other multilateral sources of financing, because it's certain that the increased pressure of COVID-19 has driven debt levels even higher. For middle-income and countries, which a lot of island states are in that category, and therefore the need for accessing innovative forms of finance is, I think, going to become increasingly important, and debt swaps are a key element to that. And in the context of the Seychelles experience, the debt swap opened the door as well to then access the sustainable bond market, and this is also a huge opportunity for African countries to be able to issue bonds, but at a much lower price. In the context of the Seychelles bond, it was priced at below half of what we would have normally have paid using a partial guarantee. And there are, I think, opportunities as well. If you look at creating marine protected areas, these can also be used potentially in carbon offsets. And particularly if we can, at COP26, we can achieve a global price on carbon, which is higher. The average price now is below $5 per ton. But if we had a price per ton of about $50 per ton, which is the minimum, the floor recommended, if we're going to align with the Paris Agreement, then there would be significant opportunity for offsets linked to marine protected areas, in particular areas that are rich in seagrass and biodiversity, which have been shown to be particularly useful in terms of sequestering carbon. So I think these are a few of the opportunities that can be explored in more depth for African countries.
Jean-Paul, and you've just, I can tell that you're extremely passionate about this and you have a great depth of understanding. Salome, if I could just turn to you to maybe discuss a little bit about what the Pacific's doing in terms of ocean financing, for means of implementation. Just a very short response, please, because I would like to invite a colleague from the European Commission to make a short intervention before we close this session. But please, Salome, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Christelle. Just briefly, as I mentioned earlier, the policy instruments that we have are under development, and we're definitely looking to the experience that has taken place in the Seychelles, as Jean-Paul had explained. But one area that we're looking at is whether we can have a debt for resilience swap. In the Pacific here, we have a Pacific Resilience Facility to support building the resilience of our communities towards the impact of climate change or combating climate change impacts. And we are looking to see, explore opportunities in how we can do, whether we can have that debt for resilience swap, as well as the debt for nature swap, noting that a lot of our members are pledging to conserve at least 30% of their ocean as marine protected areas. There has been a lot of work that we've done on ocean finance with our member countries, and we're working to develop ocean profiles for our members. So those works are also running in concurrent with the other policy instruments that we're developing. But very interesting areas that we're going to look at and consider. Thank you, Christelle.
Thank you very much, Salome. And I think that, as you both outline, I mean, there is such a richness for intra-OACPS cooperation and South-South exchange and we really must start to facilitate that sooner rather than later. But if I may just turn to, I'm not sure, given the technical problems, whether we have Fernando Travada Crende of INPA online, but he had agreed to make a very short intervention in this particular session. Fernando, are you online? And if you are, you have the floor. I'm just looking to the technicians. Do you still have the technical problems? Are there still technical problems?
Christelle? Hi, Christelle. Let me come back to you. We are having some issues regarding getting additional people on these calls for their interventions. I'm so sorry about that. And I really appreciate the hard work you and Salome and Jean-Paul have done. However, as you may be able to see here behind me, we have a lot of questions coming in via Slido. We're hearing from Pascaline asking, could the blue economy be a trap into the overuse of oceans resources? Now, I know this is taking us a little bit away from the core topic that you wanted to talk about, which is more related to governance, but perhaps you could give me your thoughts on that top question.
Yes, so I might just ask Salome to react to that. Could you just read that question through again really quickly?
Certainly. Could the blue economy be a trap into an overuse of ocean resources? Or do we run the risk? I suppose the point that Pascaline there is trying to make is, do we run the risk of overusing, overfishing, over demanding the ocean in a way that obviously it's going to help developing nations from the economic point of view, but I presume this is coming from an environmental perspective.
If I may, before I yield to Jean-Paul, Adam, I think that if we, notwithstanding these targets of, for example, 30% by 2030, but if we actually embrace this idea of sustainably managing, using and conserving our ocean and its marine resources, I do feel that we can do everything that we want to do with the ocean, for ourselves. But Jean-Paul, I'm sure that you'll be able to respond far more eloquently. If you may, just maybe 1.5 minutes to respond to that, and then I'll yield to Salome. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Christelle. And I think we are all concerned of the risk of blue washing or greenwashing, that that the term of sustainability can be applied to industries or activities that in fact are not delivering in terms of the promise of sustainability. Now, how do we address that? Now, the principle of a blue economy implies that you are using the resources within the capacity to sustain regeneration. And certainly, if we look at the African Union's strategy, by empowering local communities and actually shifting the investments away from prioritizing extraction-led activities, and also ones that are prioritizing, for example, distant fishing nations, we certainly, I think, would be heading towards the route of more sustainability rather than more pressure. And there are a number of things that the partners, including the EU, can do. For example, a commitment to elimination of harmful subsidies. If there are to be subsidies, they must be directed towards activities that are enhancing the environment and not degrading it. There should not be there for any fuel subsidies, any subsidies that encourage additional catch or that encourage inefficiencies should all be scrapped. Subsidies that allow investments to take place in marine protected areas, for example, are ways of ensuring that there is appropriate sustainability. And this has to go hand in hand with the empowerment of local communities and the development of livelihoods. So I think by doing that, by making sure that the blue economy is empowering local people and creating new opportunities and livelihoods and restoring nature in the process, we can avoid that trap of overexploitation.
Thank you, Jean-Paul.
Salome, do you want to just react very quickly to that question?
Sure. In our region, a lot of our members are dependent on our ocean. So the health of our ocean is very, very important to us. And that will be our first priority. And all the activities that we are looking in the ocean will have to will be thought of carefully with the focus on ensuring that sustainable management and use of our resources is front and center. In fisheries, our region has the healthiest tuna stock. So we are now trying to see how we can further translate that to bringing in more economic benefits to our region, noting some of the challenges that we're facing, like distance from markets and all that. But we have other regional organizations that we're working with in this region to ensure that our resources are well managed before we move to utilizing them. And when we do, we make sure that those resources are used in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salome. And we're coming to sort of the close of this session. We just have 2 minutes. But rather than, I think what I will do is I'll just thank everybody for those that have taken the time to participate in the session, and to thank Salome Taufa and Jean-Paul Adam for their very, very good interventions, outlining really just what the Pacific region is doing and what Africa is doing. And I think that, again, if we all work together and cooperate and collaborate on this really important agenda, because there are many, many benefits for all of us, and particularly for our 64 coastal states of the OACPS, then we are sort of moving in the correct direction and to achieving SDG 14. But what I would like to do is, we have a minute to go, I understand, and I have a question for you, Jean-Paul, Adam, and that is, what would be the contribution to the blue economy of the governments and leaders in the African states that are landlocked but have access to large inner lakes and rivers? And so if you could answer that, and I'm not sure how this session works, whether we just suddenly all get switched off, but nevertheless, a minute to answer that, but to really send my very best to my home, the Blue Pacific continent, through you, Salome, to thank all participants for listening very carefully. And to you, Jean-Paul Adam, you have the last word. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christelle. And maybe I should have flagged at the start that the African Union Blue Economy Strategy includes internal water resources on the continent, recognizing the key role that they play in relation particularly to nutrition, and with opportunities to further develop that through aquaculture. So it's something which is part of the strategy and part of the priorities that African governments are placing on the blue economy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And apparently we do have a couple more minutes. So I'm going to give 1 minute to Salome and then 1 minute to Jean-Paul Adam. Perhaps one key message that we can take away from this session today. But I am looking forward to staying engaged with you both and with colleagues in the Pacific, in Africa, and of course in the Caribbean. I'm so sad that we couldn't hear from them. Salome, a minute, a couple of key messages, and then to Jean-Paul. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Christelle. I think one of the key messages that I like to highlight is partnership. A lot of the work that we do, we're dealing with different stakeholders, but in our region, it's very important that we empower our private sector. A lot of times we are ahead with our management of our resources, our marine and ocean resources, but we also need to empower our private sectors. And so we need to partner with partnership will be key, especially in the Caribbean and African countries. The learning from the experiences that you guys have had in terms or in relation to the blue economy, that will be very important for us in this part of the world. And so I really look forward to the continuation of this working together with other countries in the ACP, in the ACP grouping. And it was very nice to see you again, Christelle. Thank you.